Great. So let's back up for a minute and talk about casting Living Single. What was that process like?
I loved it so much. And I think since I came up as an apprentice in this business, I kind of maintained that mentality at every stage. So when I got the opportunity to cast my first show, I went to the casting director and said, I want to sit in on the pre-reads because I want to learn what this process really looks and feels like. I want to know how you tell the difference between someone who's got it and someone who doesn't, who has that it factor, someone who's not polished, how you might polish that diamond in the rough into someone who can be a star of a show. So I went to Jolene Leader and asked her if I could sit in, and I sat in on all the pre-reads. So I saw everyone. And when you do that, you learn a lot very, very quickly. Not only about the actors and the casting process and their acting process, you also learn about your words when you hear them over and over and over again. So that really worked to my advantage because I was polishing that script. Knowing that we were going to shoot it, it was getting polished through that casting process. So I thank the many actors that we did not cast for helping me hear the material over and over again to see what was really working and what wasn't. But also, I got to hone my gut, and I feel like we did a really good job casting this show and knowing what chemistry really was and wasn't, which was also something I had begun to hone on A Different World. We discovered a lot of really great talent on that show, and I was part of that process as well. But again, from the ground up, my own show, my own vision, kind of gut checking my own voice. I literally thought Leela Rashawn was going to be Max. But when Erica Alexander came in, it was over. She was it. She was it. And she was surprised because Erica, God bless her, does not realize how hilarious and just really grounded her performances can be. I mean, she's just brilliant. She's just really brilliant. They all made me look good. They all made me look good. And John Henton, for example, I'd seen him in a showcase, in a comedy showcase, and I just really liked his energy. And when he came in and started talking about Jessa Hammer, I was like, oh, like your heart just melts. Like he believed it. He believed every word he was saying. He felt it, and you felt it. You know, and T.C. Carson submitted a tape. He was in Chicago. He submitted a tape. I believe I still have that tape, that audition tape. But when I saw them, I knew who they were. I was, you know, and I had been over the course of a couple of months, kind of seeing who wasn't working. So you knew it when it walked in the room, or when it came to you via VCR and VHS. You just knew it. You just knew it. They really like owned those roles, every single one of them. And we did take in other actors, for the network to approve, but we knew who our first choices were. So I got my first choice, and they didn't disappoint. And throughout the series, I remain grateful that they trusted this first-time show creator, with their lives for 5 seasons, with their time, with their faces that were going out into the world representing these characters. I have such tremendous respect for actors in general, and this cast in particular. We grew up together, and that was something that I also had at A Different World. I was very, close in age to those actors as well. So we were a family. So I needed that again. I needed it to be a show and a family, to give it as much time as it required to make it a hit and to make it something special. And it's something I didn't have on my second job. It was just not there. And I was just like, I craved that. And just, again, being an only child who wanted siblings, like I, gravitate toward, groups and chosen family dynamics. Like that's just who I am, and that's what I enjoy. And when you spend as much time as we spend, ideating and writing and executing and editing and, post-production on these ideas, like they become so much a part of your life, you want to love it. You want to love it, and you want to love as many people involved as possible. You can't do it with everybody, but you want to love as many facets of it as possible when you give it that kind of time.
Did you know from the beginning the romances that you wanted to develop? So did you do specific chemistry reads with Maxine and Kyle?
Didn't need him. Didn't need those chemistry reads. I just knew it was there. I just knew it was there. We did not do those chemistry reads because nobody's job was hinging on that working. I definitely had planted those relationships. There were two different kinds of relationships. The Sinclair and Overton relationship and the Max and Kyle relationship were very different kinds of relationships that were budding from the pilot. From, page one, they were there, intended. Those were not accidental relationships. And I did know also, just because I do enjoy a happy ending, I did know that I would at some point develop meaningful love interests for Kim Field's character Regine and Latifah's character Khadijah. I knew that those were, to come because I had this much paper. But that was also wonderful. Just putting that much effort into their backstory was so helpful in fleshing out stories going forward because we knew so much about where they had come from. And that was also one of the semi-unique things about the show, that it wasn't just an ensemble. It was, an ensemble of 20-somethings who also weren't just chosen family. Some of them were family members with each other, Sinclair and Khadijah, and they'd known each other from childhood and other formative experiences. Like Khadijah and Regine knew each other from when they were babies, and Max and Khadijah knew each other from college. Like that was her best friend, her chosen best friend, and Regine was the best friend that her mother decided she was going to have. But she could see all of the redeeming qualities, and they helped each other grow. They challenged each other in ways that people who've known you since you were in your diapers can challenge you, and that's a good thing. It's a really good thing, and I think that history made the show special, and the fact that it was about this group of kind of wide-eyed, singles in the city, learning how to live and love together, for the first time on their own, made it a really special premise.
What are your memories of shooting the pilot?
So much fun. So exciting. I mean, how can you not be excited? Like, these are characters that existed in my head, 7 months ago. And now they're being played by this brilliant cast of people who are nailing every line, every joke, owning each of their roles. The audience is loving it. From the table read, it was gangbusters, as we say. The table read was gangbusters. And yet, I got a note from the network that it needed to be 10% funnier. And I was like, I don't even know. I don't do numbers. I'm a wordsmith. I write. Don't know what you mean, but okay. We'll add some jokes here and there. And, there were lots of notes that took things in slightly different directions than were intended. But they were okay. Like, I knew the notes I could take. I knew the notes that I could make my own, and I knew the notes that I had to say no to. For example, get rid of Maxine Shaw. No way, no how. She needs to be part of this ensemble. Every character was important. There were no superfluous characters. There was no character that we were kind of just planting in there to discover on the fly. I will say that, like real people, the characters all evolved, and that was very intentional. It was very intentional. And I do think, we received some criticism at the beginning of the series. Some people didn't feel like, maybe the comedy or the characters were as evolved as they wanted them to be, but that's too bad. The audience got it, and they embraced it, and they still do. They still do. Again, what a blessing to create something in my little room by myself that people are still watching and loving and being motivated and inspired by 30 years later.
How do you think...
I'm not going to cry.
Tears are
but I am
allowed.
moved. No, I am moved by how passionate people are about the show. I mean, like, just the fan art and the TikToks and the, campaigns to reboot the show. It's really, really overwhelming in the best way. It really is, because
Comments, would you love to see a living single reboot?
it is an authentic depiction of me and my friends and the people that I hold dear. So for society at large to embrace that, it's meaningful. It's really meaningful.
You did shoot in front of a live studio audience as well, so you got to see reactions in real time.
Absolutely.
What did that add to the program?
Well, that's just the beauty of multicam, really. I mean, I don't know what people did kind of just coming out of the pandemic and they were still shooting multicams, but they were shooting them without an audience. You know, there's something very rewarding and just electric about that live audience immediate feedback, and also like just honing your skills when a joke or line doesn't work and just coming up with a new one on the spot. Like, I loved continuing to sharpen those skills. Now, I've been in single camera for a few years now, and I feel like in my real life, my husband's like, okay, enough with the jokes. Because I feel like that's the only place I have to like hone those on the spot skills. And that's just a part of, you know, who I am. So I got to exercise that muscle. But I kind of miss it. But it was really, really fun to make so many episodes of television in front of a live audience. Like, there's just a real reciprocity that, it's kind of inexplicable how it makes you feel. But it's damn good. It's damn good. I miss it. I wish we were able to sell more multicams. I would definitely go back and try to execute another one, for sure. I miss that. We also, because we were only considered a pilot presentation, we shot our pilot on some augmented Family Matters sets because we had very little money. And, you know, even though they seemed enthusiastic about it, they were kind of hedging their bets, not necessarily all in. And they did that for several shows. Interestingly, the ones I can recall are actually shows with black casts. So that's something that, is kind of a cross we've had to bear as part of this, our experience as black people in the television industry, including The Cosby Show. If you go back and watch the pilot of The Cosby Show, they did not shoot it on their regular sets. They shot it on some very kind of janky, basic sets that then became the fabulous Huxtable home in subsequent episodes. But they only had a 15-minute presentation, in fact, for that one. And I think ours was intended to be a 15-minute presentation, but we ended up shooting a full-length presentation in those augmented sets. And then we caught lightning in a bottle that night, so we didn't reshoot the pilot. Thank goodness. But they did such a great job in front of that audience. It was really nice to have those actors, whom I said just really bought into it, get that feedback from the audience, and not play to the audience, but just receive it. Receive that gift. Laughter is a gift. It's a gift. It's a gift, and it's healing. It's one of the reasons why, even though I've definitely done some dramedies, I live for comedy. It's just so healing. Some people go to therapy. I write comedy.
At what point did you become showrunner? Because you said you weren't attached at the beginning to become the showrunner.
At the beginning, yes. So I wrote the pilot, and I polished the pilot, and I cast the pilot. But somewhere in the midst of that green light process to shoot the pilot, Warner Brothers sat me down with a very nice man named Tom Anderson, who had, along with his partner, co-run Cheers the year before, and he was now on an overall deal at Warner Brothers. And because it is a multi-million-dollar enterprise, and I had not managed a show, I had only had a producer title, and they didn't know, what skills I really had. We had this arranged marriage. We were sat down, and, the way it was put to me is like, a lot of money is on the line, and we'd like you to have this help. And Tom was like, I don't know anything about this show. I think your script is funny, and you seem to know what you're doing, so I'll do it. I mean, he was like just an angel, really. He's like there to be my guardian angel, and he didn't futz with it. He added some jokes, and we had a good time. And Tom, he had such great room bits. I won't do any of them for you here, but he had a lot of great, he brought a lot of great energy to the room once we got up and running. But he really, for the most part, just like gave me my lane, and provided protection for me, like a layer of protection against, notes that didn't make sense and that kind of thing.
Man, so what was your favorite Living Single episode?
And by the middle of the first season, it was very obvious to, the powers that be that I was running the show. And so by the middle of first season, I negotiated an executive producer title. I was the showrunner, and I also made my first overall deal at Warner Brothers. And the show was a hit that helped. All of those things. I had demonstrated my ability to do everything that the job required to run the show. And Tom co-signed the fact that I was actually doing the work. He was happy to have me do the work, and I was happy to do it. So it was a perfect partnership in that regard, because it doesn't always work out that way. Oftentimes when people are, part of these arranged marriages, there'll be someone who has the showrunner title, who comes in and they maybe have or haven't created a show, but they decide that they want their voice to take over. But Tom was really great about that. And I was really clear with him that I knew from intimate experience on a different world that whoever is in that showrunner seat has a tremendous amount of power over the tone and the shape and the look of the show. From seasons 1 to 2, it was night and day on a different world. So, we had a showrunner season 1 who had come off of a very popular high school show, and that permeated, the experience and what a different world was that first season. So, I was just very clear, like, we'll have none of that. I know what this is. And he was like, and yes, you do. Let's do it. Let me figure out how I can best help you do that and empower you. And that was, it was so easy for him. And that made it easier for me to be empowered, and then for me to empower others. Like it's effortless. It really is effortless to help other people.
How would you define the role of a showrunner? What do you see that as?
Woo, careful what you wish for kind of job. It really is being the showrunner is very different from being the head writer. Being the head writer is guiding the writing, but the showrunning gig is an all-encompassing one. And if I were to put it in a nutshell, I see it as not only managing this multi-million-dollar enterprise and all aspects of pre-production, production, and post, but also making it my job to inspire every single person in the writer's room and on the crew every single day. Like, it's this living organism that you want everyone to buy into and feed, ideally. That's what you want. And I that's how I approach it. I approach it as a job where I inspire people. It makes my job easier. Going back to what Marcy Carsey told me, delegate or die. Like, you don't have to do it all. In fact, you will die trying to do it all. Be generous, dole out responsibility, teach others to do things so that you don't have to be in all of those places. And quite frankly, not being everywhere and being everything to everybody became more essential as I got married and had kids. I took home every script the first season of Living Single. Every single draft went through my little sisterly machine. Then I got married in between seasons 1 and 2. And I'm like, my husband wants some nighttime. I can't be up all night doing this. So, we had to have more focused time at work. And, other people could write outlines or polish an outline before, or a script before we tabled it as a group. I became more efficient at it. So, necessity makes you really get resourceful and creative in how you manage things. But being a showrunner is an incredibly taxing and rewarding job. but it is not one that you should undertake on your own. And it's fun for other people to learn how to do these things, and then hopefully you're, emboldening them to do it, their way when their time comes. And it's really important.
Oh, yeah. Tell us about building that team of writers that you trusted so that you didn't have to take everything home with you. Like, what were you looking for in your writers?
I love assembling a really diverse writer's room. I've never had a writer's room where I was the only in any category. It's great when you can find someone who has some experience that's close to yours, as one other voice in the room, someone who really, even if their experience isn't close to yours, someone who also knows how to listen to your voice. So someone else who can kind of, carry the torch and have that kind of voice and sensibility in the room. But then I want to have a room full of people who've come from different places and have different points of view so that the world and the work can be really layered. I think that's where the best work comes from, like really kind of passionate debate, and I like to do things that excite and scare me in equal doses, so I want people in the room who will disagree with me. When I'm ready for the disagreement to be over, I'm very clear about that too. But I like that process of listening and absorbing other perspectives. And I haven't worked on a show, and certainly haven't run a show where we're not all still in touch with each other and wanting each other's point of view and caring about each other through it all, through the decades, because I've been here a while. But because we've shared, our intimate personal details, we've laid ourselves bare. We've been incredibly vulnerable in the room, which I encourage, because again, I like ripping pages from my diary and the diary of others. It's like you got to rip those pages out and use them, and then you got to go live some more life, and then you got to get some pages from some other people, so you never run out of ideas. But I love telling those kinds of personal stories. I love when people come into the room with some anecdote, that sounds like really wild, and we're like, let's build a story around what just happened to you.
Are there any specific storylines from your life that you're comfortable sharing?
I'll just say, if you've watched any show that I've written on, and certainly if I created it, you know way more than you should about me. I think that's safe to say.
Did the cast have input on the storylines on Living Single?
They did. I mean, we listened to them. We would actually have note sessions where we would get feedback from them. And there were certainly times when they didn't want to do things, and there were certainly things that they would say that were kind of offensive or incendiary, and we would be like, okay, let's work this out. And there's some I would say maybe infamous debates or quarrels that I've had over the years, not only with that cast but with others, but with that cast in particular, that I'm going to say from my book.
Fair enough.
But it was there were some really great moments of growth. Really great moments of growth where, it's like you either win or you learn is kind of something that people say. And it's like there were times when we were all winning, and then there were times when we were challenging each other, and we grew from that. We learned and we grew. So it was good. It was a really good experience. It was sad when it was over. Yeah. And it's really actually not completely over, just in terms of my life energy. I'm still on a text thread with the whole cast. I mean, just this morning we were texting, and it's just great. Like, I don't know that everybody gets that. Yeah. And I have that with lots of work family members, like show after show after show. And even if I didn't run the show, like, I helped to cultivate that energy, that family vibe on every show I worked on. If it was possible, I made it a family. Yeah. Even if Thanksgiving was a little tense, we were a family. there are a lot of people who are building an empire. There are a lot of moguls who are TV show writers and show creators. And I really don't seek to build an empire. I just want to build a safe haven for creatives.
I think you have. Before we jump into some specific episodes, you had mentioned earlier, you didn't get to design the set for the pilot. Talk a little bit about crafting the look of the show, what their home interiors look like, the characters, costumes, makeup, hair, that kind of thing.
So much fun to be able to build all of that from the ground up. And as I said to you earlier, I got into this whole show creating thing because I wanted to create my own work environment, but also wanted to create a visual environment of the set and with the costumes and the hair that was just authentic and reflective of the world I lived in. My sorority is Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Our colors are pink and green. There's lots of pink and green on that set, and people peep that out, and they just feel that extra connection. There's lots of black art, in all of the sets, and that's all very, very intentional. Just infusing as much of us into the fabric of the show as possible has just been a trademark of mine. I feel like it's important. People see not only themselves in the characters, but they feel connected to the environment that the characters are moving in, and they see their homes, and it just gives them something else that resonates with them in a powerful way. It feels like their home. So all of those details are very, very intentional.
The show is definitely a continuation of your art as activism and activism as art. Talk a little bit about striking that tone on this show, because it was a different tone than on A Different World.
Absolutely. The tone of Living Single was different from A Different World because they were also living, at a different time in their lives. They weren't in this concentrated, cauldron of consciousness that is a college environment, right? But there are definitely, issues that we all face just out in the world at large.
What you like most between the two shows of A Different World and Living Single? Let me know in the comments.
So coming up, feeling that sense of responsibility, social responsibility in my storytelling, and knowing how powerful the medium is, we definitely tackled some issues on Living Single, but we also worked very hard to not make it feel like a very special episode, whether people received it that way or not. Ultimately, the goal was to have impact. The goal was to have impact. And, we asked about, did the actors have input? Yes. When they looked a certain way, we worked that into the show. We did this great episode, where Kyle received some criticism because of his very, ethnocentric hairstyle. But I didn't write that character as having locks, but he did, and he was always, a stockbroker. So what is that like? And now here we are, talking very actively in our society about the Crown Act, because it's really important that we wear our hair in a style that is comfortable to us, that makes us feel beautiful and, good in our own skin and hair and, wardrobe. So it was great to do episodes like that speak very specifically to the culture, because the characters are human first. They are human first, but they're also not just kind of by happenstance Black and African American. They're decidedly Black, and living the duality of what that means to be Black in America, to be a minority in these certain environments where you can't just do whatever you want at whenever you want. It's one of the reasons I also gave.
What does being Black in America mean to you?
Khadijah, her own magazine, made her an entrepreneur so that we could also show that you can do this. You can create your own space where you and others like you, or others who are different from you, but just under your auspices, can thrive. And the world that we depicted on that show was also very diverse and very true to New York. And I'm really proud of that. It looked like the real New York.
Off camera, we had talked about a moment on Swing Out Sisters, which is a season 4 episode. You included a little visual touch in that episode. Can you talk about that?
Yes. We put a Soul-Aid, which is a brown skin tone Band-Aid, on a white man because we just wanted to kind of get that little piece of visual information about how, A, these things exist, and to also maybe have people like raise an eyebrow and think about the tone of every other Band-Aid on the planet. It's just that little culture clue that tells you not everybody has the same skin tone. Think about it without making it a message, just doing it. It's just there. This is the Band-Aid available. Yeah. And the white man can wear it the same way a black man can put on a regular Band-Aid and have it stand out.
We talked a little bit about network notes, but what was the publicity for the show like in terms of what Warner Brothers and Fox were doing or asking you to do in terms of promotion, things like that?
Publicity for Living Single was pretty good when this show launched. But we keep talking about these not so secret secrets. When another show that had a similar premise came up against us and existed in the zeitgeist, there was definitely some diminished promotion and attention on the show. And that was very disappointing. It was very disappointing. But I do believe that the studio was always supportive, but they didn't show their support necessarily in terms of marketing and promotional dollars. And that didn't help the show succeed beyond season 5. But the fans were always there. In fact, it was the fans who brought us back for the 5th season, that shortened season, because the show wasn't originally on the schedule. And there was an uproar from the fans.
Would you actually receive fan mail? Would it make it to you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Trunks of letters came in.
What kind of responses did you get?
What kind of responses did I get?
Yeah, like would people like write, I relate to this character? Or
Oh,
this,
absolutely.
Like,
I mean, yes, people, they love these characters.
Yeah.
They see themselves, they see their family members in these characters on Living Single. And I got a lot of thank yous. To this day, I get a lot of that in my DMs and on my Instagram account, which I'm barely on Instagram, but when I do post things, I get messages from total strangers just thanking me for being visionary, for creating what some consider a blueprint, and just for persevering and continuing to do work that displays us in an authentic light. I'm super proud of that. And it means something to me. I respond to them. I do, because I appreciate it. I appreciate that they appreciate the work, because I put my life's blood into it. And I've been doing it for 4 decades. Wild.
Indeed. You mentioned that the kind of the seeds for the romances were there for the beginning. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about developing those? So we'll start with Sinclair and Overton.
Yes. Sinclair and Overton as a couple came about out of my desire to just see a very unfettered, easy, simple kind of love. It's just we always see characters at odds. Not that that's not interesting, and you do need conflict for comedy, but just to see 2 people who are so clearly destined for each other, and their conflict is figuring out how to get to each other. That was really the conflict. They were each holding their own conflict. But I just thought it was so sweet, and it also gave others in the show and in the audience the hope that love doesn't have to be fraught. It doesn't have to be hard. It's really kind of a choice to make it hard. Now, Max and Kyle. They are two strong-willed people who live to make things complicated. They do. They just do. My husband knows this. But their love for each other is intense and real, and that's what they thrive off of, that intensity. But they also, over the course of the seasons, found moments where they made it easy too. And by design, Overton and Sinclair were there to bring balance and perspective. So they were able to see that their love didn't have to be so hard. And again, if people take that away from the show, then bravo, because that's what was intended.
Yeah. Erica,
balance. It's always about balance and intention.
Yes.
I live for those things.
Eric Alexander has talked about the Maxine Shaw effect.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. It came about, first of all, we know that representation matters, right? There's plenty of shows, particularly shows with, featuring African-American characters that have inspired people to live better lives, to dream bigger than maybe their circumstance would dictate they should dream. And the Maxine Shaw effect is a real thing. And we did some research and discovered that 1 in 3 Black female lawyers today were inspired by Maxine Shaw. And that's pretty powerful stuff. And one of the reasons we did the research was that, Erica would go to all these places and have, like throngs of judges, run her down and tell her how inspirational she's been to them, or other people who are lawyers or working in the public sector, like Stacey Abrams, Ayanna Pressley, Marilyn Mosby, say, your character is the reason I decided to go down this path.
What does it mean to you that a character that you created has had that kind of impact?
At the risk of sounding redundant, it's just incredibly affirming that I have been doing the thing that I was purposed to do, and that there's value in me continuing to do it. I'm here to turn up on volume on the voices that have not been heard, and to provide imagery that inspires for decades.
There were some cast changes that happened in season 5. T.C. Carson left at the beginning of season 5. How did his departure impact the show?
The sigh. It's still painful. It's painful to think about. It was painful to have to be part of that dynamic. And it was unfortunate. It was just unfortunate. But it was a decision that was made born out of financial realities of the show. As I mentioned, there was a campaign to bring the show back. And when, the powers that be came to the conclusion that they would bring it back for 13 episodes, they had severely cut the budget. And so we had to make some adjustments. And we had to, get rid of some characters. But he was gracious enough to agree to do a handful of episodes that really helped us give the proper farewell to the show. When he came back in the final episode, that meant the world to me.
Yeah.
To be honest, I personally love the bond that Kyle and Maxine had on the show. To be honest with you, they were my favorite TV couple. Let me know in the comments who was your favorite TV couple and what was your favorite episode. I genuinely want to know. You have just watched Yvette Lee Bowser interview, part 2 of 4.